Hello, everybody, and welcome to a mid-season review of the Winging It Formula One podcast. Not a mid-season review of the podcast, a mid-season review from us of Formula One, which is on the podcast. The mid-season review of this podcast would be very interesting, and to our knowledge, we don't have any fan podcasts about us, but I mean, please let us know if you've started a podcast about the Winging It F1 podcast. I'm Freddie Coates. I'm going off on one, clearly. It's hot here, so I have clearly developed heat stroke. I'm joined by Adam Dickinson and Nigel Chiu, who are going to help me rate all of the races from the 2022 Formula One season so far. We've had 13, there's 9 left, and we're just going to rate 13 of them because 9 haven't happened. What we've done is collate an average score for all the races based on how we've rated them out of 10. It's taken time to do because we're all words people, not numbers people, but we've done it, we think. There was a moment where I did work out the score out of 10 for Canada to be 25. That was me making a mistake. But anyway, let's say hello to Adam and Nigel. Adam, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I didn't know when I was coming in on that, so you caught me slightly unawares. But yeah, if people do want to review the podcast, then feel free and let us know what you do. I mean, we started our podcast around this time, a bit earlier, but around this time 2 years ago. So maybe it's the time for you to do it. But yeah, thank you to everyone who has been listening so far. And hopefully you enjoyed this one as much as you enjoyed the other ones, or more if you hated them.
Yes, we're very happy with the support we've had recently, and of course, because we're a podcast, we have to say something along the lines of, why not give us a review on the podcast platform of your choice, because it really helps us out. And it probably does, but we're so small that it doesn't really matter so much because we're not being ranked against like NBA podcasts and stuff like that are huge. But anyway, now it's time to be introduced to Nigel today. Hello, Nigel.
Hi, Freddie. For anyone watching on YouTube, my video isn't on because my internet is getting worse.
Now his sound's gone. That's just amazing.
That is, yeah, it's timely.
It is timely. It's going to be great when Nigel goes off on one later down in the podcast, because he did make a point about having to disagree with us on certain things.
Yes.
So this means that Adam and I kind of have a bit more power, a bit more kind of fake news media to silence him. So, oh, he's back. He's back.
We can turn his internet off if we want.
Yeah,
Bang.
We can just kick him out of the podcast, to be honest. But anyway, rather than doing that, we'll just have the jeopardy of not knowing if Nigel is there or not, just because he doesn't have a face on our Zoom call, just a big name, just a banner with his name. But we're going to go straight to our ranked races. And our first race is going to be our lowest race. We're going to go lowest to best. We're going to go best till last, best last, whatever. And our worst ranked race was Australia, which collated an average score of 4.5 out of 10. Ooh. Low. It's still passed if it was a university project, but
just
only just. Nigel, while I know you have internet, give us a line on Australia and why it is the worst ranked race of the year.
I've not woken up for the Australian Grand Prix for about...
Well, Nigel's just forfeited his right to speak by saying he didn't wake up for it. So, Adam, why don't you say something?
I mean, you said give us a word, and he used his word on Ive, so it's not very good use from Nigel. Yeah, but I rated it highly simply because I enjoyed it. I watched it at midnight on Saturday night in a bar in Oklahoma, so I enjoyed that more than the race itself. The race itself, I don't really remember much of, whether it's the circumstances or the race. I'll let you decide. But yeah, it was immemorable other than where I was watching it.
Yeah, I remember the race being relatively disappointing because it seemed to promise an interesting fight between Red Bull and Ferrari. Red Bull couldn't stick with Ferrari. Leclerc drove lights to flag, and Verstappen broke down, and it just got a bit as a race to me. But I liked the new track. I liked that, and I think that could bode well for the future. I think it could hold a good race. I just think it just didn't at this time.
Yeah, that's part of it. Is it was the first Australian Grand Prix in a few years, and there was a new track and there was a lot of excitement there, and it just didn't really deliver there on that.
Agreed. Yeah, this is the first time I woke up for the Australian Grand Prix in about 8 or 9.
He should have just picked up. He should have picked up where he left off, and then like eventually throughout the podcast, then we'll hear the end of the sentence.
Well, I think we know what he's going to say. It's the first time he woke up for the Australian Grand Prix in about 8 or 9 years, and for Nigel, that means a lot. He's clearly excited for it, and it just didn't work for him. He's just put a note in a chat that says it was all round, and a word I can't repeat on the podcast if we want to not mark it as explicit.
Rhymes with hit.
Yes, Adam just given it away. He said bit. Now we move on to our second worst race of the year, the penultimate race if you were going the other way around on this list. And that race is, the greatest race of all time, the Miami Grand Prix. And that's because we gave it a 5 as our collective score. Adam, why is just the Miami Grand Prix only have a 5?
Miami Grand Prix was rubbish. I would call it a worse word, but we're apparently not using expletives. Like, it was just
normally.
I know there was the battle at the end, but again, it was like it could have been fun. It was in Miami, but it wasn't really. They have fake marinas and they were miles away from the coast or any iconic bits of Miami apart from the football stadium. And it just, I don't know, it was just a kind of, outside the football stadium, it was just an insert name here, part of America, that it just felt like it missed an opportunity. And I know the reasons behind that, but yeah, it felt like it missed something to make it more Miami, and they had fake water, and the race itself was pretty dull. And I know there was a fight at the end, but there wasn't really, and yeah, just disappointing.
Yeah, I don't think it lived up to the hype, I guess. Although we did still have that wheel-to-wheel battle. So, not every race this year we have had that. But I guess when the took Sainz Hill and took Leclerc, it looked like he was going to win, and without the safety car at the end, it would have been, a lot worse, really. So yeah,
it would have been. I gave it a 4. I would have given it probably a 3 or a 2 if it went for the safety car at the end. It was awful.
I think from my side, the hype around the race was infectious. I think there's a few races. Obviously, I mean, I watch a race and I want to be there, but I mean, I really actually got on board with the hype around the Miami Grand Prix from an event point of view. I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be the best race of all time, which is what they probably wanted me to think. But I was absolutely fine with the things that other people found cringy. I did just think the race was kind of like, it got to that point where we were getting a bit kind of used to 2022 Formula One, which was kind of Ferrari would get on pole, Red Bull would overtake and win. And it just kind of was the most sort of blatant of that, because Verstappen's overtake on Leclerc was on lap like 5 or something. And that to me just kind of just spelled out all the stuff that had been frustrating about the previous couple of races, which was sort of Ferrari not being able to quite live with Red Bull, which, is a personal kind of wanting to watch the fight kind of thing. But yeah, that for me kind of brought the race down. But who knows, that they're open to doing changes to things like that, like the really weird tight chicanes and things, and moving DRS zones, and obviously with that. So Miami is obviously a race they want to do really well with. So I think it's one we can have a bit of faith for in the future. Do you guys think that's me being too optimistic, or?
The thing is, for me,
willing to make changes.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is it feels like an entertainment event rather than an F1 race. So for that to kind of be balanced out, it needs to be a good F1 race. So hopefully that will kind of continue, and like you say, the changes they make will bolster it a bit. But I think they need to. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I think they need to make changes, or should make changes to try and jazz it up a bit.
Yeah.
Would you say there's a kind of argument to kind of just not to like go on for too long on this because we want to get through this quickly, but just like bolstering so much entertainment around the F1 race rather than balancing it with the F1 race, because an F1 race could be amazing and could be absolutely dire. Like, we know that. That's just sport. But like making sure everything away from that is going to be high octane and great is a good thing.
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah. It just feels like Miami. That's the reason they're there.
Yeah.
Basically. It's not making it around. I don't think it's a reason to.
Personally.
I don't think it's a reason to have an F1 race on the calendar, is because it's got amazing entertainment around it, is what I'm saying. I think like maximize what there is around it, but the focus should still be the race itself. And it's
probably too early to judge that overall, to be fair, for a 5-year kind of thing. You can't judge everything on the first thing. That's what they say about all this kind of stuff. We're going to go straight on
first episode.
Yeah, we're going to go straight on to our third ranked race, which was Azerbaijan, which got a brilliant average score of 5.167, which puts it just above Miami. Obviously, Azerbaijan isn't somewhere where it's famed for the off track. It's famed for the on-track kind of kerfuffles, but there wasn't really so much this year, was there, Adam?
Well, there was a rather large Ferrari-shaped kerfuffle, but that kind of ruined the race, really. I think that's why we all put it so low, is because that was it. That was the main. And it was an exciting kerfuffle at the time, but it really torpedoed the race for the rest of it. So, yeah, that's why I put it so low.
I think the first half was quite exciting. But I guess that was made because of the Ferrari.
Yeah, the Ferrari strategy was really interesting with the early safety car, but it was unfortunately ruined by the Ferrari power unit. And the potential was there, and it just didn't. It unfortunately didn't live up to it the way the race developed. I think we're all agreed on that. So ranked just above Azerbaijan is the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, Imola, at 5.25. I was all right with this one. I put it up a little bit more because of the sprint. I thought the sprint was a really, really good sprint, actually. I really enjoyed that on the Saturday afternoon, just the kind of the fight between Leclerc and Verstappen in that. And the race on the Sunday, it promised a lot more than it gave, just because of the nature of the drying line on the track meant that no one could really overtake. But there were storylines throughout. You had the big Leclerc mistake and things like that, and it seemed to be kind of interesting on a few places. And midfield around that was kind of cooking in a few ways, from my memory. So yeah, I'm all right with Imola this year.
Yeah, I mean, we should say our average was a 5, and that we all, or me and Freddie both rated it above 5, I think. So yeah, I raised it by the sprint race. I think it was a good advert for what sprint race can be if they get it right and if conditions allow it to be right. So yeah, again, I don't know. The race itself was kind of forgettable for me, but that's okay. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's not the worst. It's not Miami.
I think as a weekend, I found it a really enjoyable classic F1 weekend. And there's a counter to Miami, which is I found a kind of an interesting and kind of a whole different kind of, the whole kind of Super Bowl thing has been thrown around too much, but an event kind of vibe, whereas this is a classical kind of Grand Prix of European Grand Prix, which is kind of 80s vibe and things like that, which I enjoyed as well. After Imola, we have Monaco, which I think, to be honest, I'm surprised Monaco's this far down, but I think actually we had quite a few kind of decent races, and I'm kind of been pleasantly surprised by there's been more decent, because I thought Monaco was really interesting. And I think it could have been really different and really weird as a race. Obviously, there was so many weird stuff that went on with the start of that race. But once it got going, I thought the whole sort of weird kind of Ferrari strategy, the wet dry of it all, kind of made it really intriguing throughout the race until it kind of did the classic Monaco of kind of being decided with 20 laps to go. So yeah, it was ranked as a 6 and a third, I should say, before we go into that. 6 and a third.
Yeah, you're right. You're right in that it's a very classic Monaco thing, that it's like, oh, this could be quite a nice end of the race, and then it just isn't, and it's just, oh, well, that's happened. Yeah, I think looking back, if this title fight was still more of a title fight, I might have done it a bit higher, because it'd feel kind of more, I can't think of, like, maybe significant. It's just looking back now, it's like, oh, great, and Ferrari lost out, and that's a time where they could have been closer in the championship fight. So it kind of it struck a bit more pessimistic chord because of where we are now, to me. But you're right, it probably maybe on excitement alone, then it could have been a bit higher, and condensed excitement, it could have been a bit higher. But yeah, it was not a bad Monaco race. It is there.
Yeah, and I think it had a lot going for it, and I think on stuff it did deliver with what it had going for it. And unfortunately, and there's always this question after Monaco Grand Prix: why is the broadcasting in control of the Automobile Club de Monaco rather than Formula One? Because the amount of interesting stuff that was released post race on sort of midfield overtakes and fighting that was actually going on during that race, like genuine racing that we just didn't really see on the main feed, which would have made the race way more interesting, I think, if you interspersed it cleverly, which is a really hard thing to do with all racing, I appreciate, and live sport. But the amount that was dropped post-race in Monaco as a broadcast did detract from the enjoyability of the race on the day, in my opinion, because there could have been more. That's a hindsight thing, but yeah.
Who do they have doing the broadcast? Is it just like old codgers from the Automobile Club who's like someone who's like usually the secretary, but just like goes in to be director for the weekend?
I don't know. Ask Bernie; he knows all about it, and he's just.
Well, we'll get him on the pod for next week.
He'll do anything. He's just trying to do anything to stay relevant these days. Going on our podcast would be great because we're not relevant at all. Above that is a recent Grand Prix, the French Grand Prix, which is ranked 6 2/3. Similar to Baku, you could say, in that the biggest storyline that was going to develop throughout the race that was really interesting for the first third of the race, the Ferrari Red Bull fight that was kind of just brewing and looked like it was going to cook really interestingly throughout the race, but then Leclerc dropped it. We're blaming all these races on Ferrari.
Well, I think that kind of tells the story of the season, to be honest. Yeah, it's kind of, it felt to me quite a French Grand Prix, quite a kind of stereotypical French Grand Prix. There was a bit of promise, and then it just didn't really deliver to me. Yeah, it was there. There was kind of, it really felt like, excitement for Ferrari to come and start. It's kind of the last 4 races have all been, Ferrari can win this and take a step back in the championship, and it was another one where that didn't happen. So it felt quite apt to be probably ending Paul Ricard's F1 career, at least for now.
Yes, it did. And I think you're very right in that, in pointing to the fact that it really was kind of a nail in the coffin, you could say, for the championship fight this year. One of the many. And then we move on to the 7th ranked race of the year, which is the Austrian Grand Prix, which is fittingly rated 7.167. It's 7s around, and then there's a 1.6 as well, which means 16 because Charles Leclerc won. We can find links in everything, numbers, lumberwang.
7s because Valtteri Bottas won 2 years ago, and he's 77. So it's all fitting together.
Yeah, as anyone in 2017, which had a 7 in it. Look at that. And Austria was Valtteri Bottas' first podium in 2014, which is 7 times 2. Look at this. No, we're not. This is science. This is what they do in universities. I don't know. In research.
You're the one who's graduated.
Yeah, the other one is at university. But yeah, I think this is a good race. I really enjoyed it, and I think the 1.6 in the rating points directly to Charles Leclerc overtaking Max Verstappen 3 times. Sure, and Ferrari doing all right for some reason.
Yeah, I think Nigel's rated it lower than us, so fortunately he isn't here to speak about that. But yeah, it was.
We can shut him down.
Yeah, exactly. So Nigel, you're chatting shit. It was better than 6.5 basically. The sprint race was a sprint race. It wasn't Imola, it's fair to say. But yeah, I found it always felt like things were in play, and I think that's partly just down to Austria, that it is a good track for that, and things can change.
It's a really good description.
The pendulum swings over the course of the race. So yeah, that'd be my analysis. That it always felt there was promise, and it partly delivered on that. And yeah, I think 7. It wasn't a showstopper, but it was well above average, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. I think I really enjoyed the entire race. I think you saying stuff always in play is a really good description. Ranked 6th is Canada, which I'm intrigued by. I would have ranked Austria above Canada by a chunk if this was just my own list. And I did. But anyway, Canada was a good Grand Prix. You had a nice little fight between Sainz and Verstappen that was really interesting. You had a few kind of weird little bits throughout the kind of field, but I think the majority being Sainz always getting close to Verstappen just was really exciting, I thought.
Yeah, it's a kind of weird one because I ranked Miami so low, and I've ranked this significantly higher, nearly double what it's called Miami. And I feel like you can kind of compare them in some ways, in that there wasn't loads going on at the front, and then there was a safety car, and then there was at the end. So, but I guess subjectively, it was cool being back in Canada, it just felt Canada again, like it's a dynamic track. It just made it feel every time Sainz got close, and there was I think it was 2 or 3 laps from the end where he got really close and got alongside and wasn't able to get it done. But it was just the tension. There was always tension there, and yeah, and it was you had Leclerc coming through them from the back. It wasn't. It was what it was. He had an exciting qualifying session on the Saturday. Alonso getting on the front row as well. So
Great.
I guess objectively, maybe I should rank it a bit lower, but I just liked it, and I liked having Canada back as well because I really like it as an event, and it was just a likable Grand Prix.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Above Canada is Barcelona, Spain, the Spanish Grand Prix. To be fair, it's above Canada, but they've got the same grade, so I'm being wrong here. They're 7 1/3 each. So joint with Canada is Spain. Adam, Spain, weird Grand Prix, I thought, but interesting for a lot of it. You obviously had spins around the block for Verstappen and Sainz, and then you had Ferrari messing up, but not messing up, and then messing up, and George Russell led the race for a bit. Mercedes seemed to be back, but they weren't. My dog is against the Spanish Grand Prix. But anyway, Adam, quick, before I get deafened by a dog.
Well, and before the listener gets deafened by a dog. Yeah, it was Spain. It didn't really feel like it deserved to be a Red Bull 1-2, to be honest. It felt like Ferrari much more in play. And again, a bit like with Monaco, it's just Ferrari. Looking back now, it's a real death nail in the coffin of Ferrari's season, as Freddie said before. So, yeah,
a death nail.
Yes, a death
nail,
a nail of death in the coffin that already has a dead championship in. So, yeah, it was. Yeah, again, kind of promised a lot more than it delivered on, which is maybe a theme of this season as we're going through these, but. Yeah, still an entertaining enough race to be in the top third of our ratings, roughly.
Yeah, the rating has kind of given what me and you gave it, so that's kind of worked out. And then now we're into the top 4. I thought it was top 3, but I bigged it up too much. But anyway, 4th, not quite on the podium.
The Champions League spaces.
Race. Yes, it's in the championship fight. Is the Hungarian Grand Prix. Woo, Hungary. Yeah, it's not recency bias because it was incredibly absorbing Grand Prix, as Crofty said, and as I said a lot on the podcast we had of the Hungarian Grand Prix. You had a fight kind of all over the place. You had a winner from 10th place. You had Ferrari capitulating. You had Mercedes doing well. And it just kind of gave the impression of, well, I didn't expect that to happen whenever you looked at the result of the grid.
Side note, now you've mentioned it. I said capitulating in a class in America is like a headline idea thing, and no one knew what it meant. It just wasn't.
Yeah, it's a hard word to know what it means.
It doesn't feel like it's particularly technical in any way. I was extremely surprised, but yeah, I really liked
people not knowing that word.
Well,
don't be so snobby, Adam, for goodness sake. Get that spoon out your ass.
Yes,
we can be explicit.
Well, I'm not. Well, yeah, I'm not going to do that on camera. Yeah, I really liked Hungary. What did I rate it? I rated it 7. I rated it the lowest out of everyone. Brilliant. But yeah, it was. There was just bits going on. It was the first genuine 3-team fight at the front that we've seen. There was an exciting spin from Verstappen. Again, could have been a lot better if Ferrari didn't screw up. But still, it's just entertaining. Hungary tends to give entertainment. It obviously did last year, and this year kind of felt like the other end of the spectrum. To compare the two, they're both great F1 races, but Hungary last year was just complete chaos and that anything can happen part of F1, which doesn't always come through. This was when it's not anything can happen, but it just plays out in a way that is exciting when it's still expected, if you get what I mean. Although Verstappen coming through wasn't necessarily expected. But yeah, it was a nice 3 battle. It's a nice way to take us into the summer break. I feel like Hungary always delivers, and it's got me excited. It's got me excited for the triple header to come.
It's one of those tracks that's sort of become amazing in the past sort of 10, 15 years. Since they did a change to the track in 2003, I want to say, and made it tighter at the start and at the first corner and things like that, and did a few kind of modifications. And since then, it's kind of crept into being a really exciting race. You had 2006, you had 2009, which was a very interesting race, and kind of since then, they've all been relatively decent storylined races, in my opinion.
I mean, I was doing it. To me, it's like a must stay, and that's really interesting because there's not as many European tracks that aren't classic 1950 Grand Prix that are must stay. Really, I was doing a piece looking at how everyone's going to figure out its calendar, and once you take away the original quartet from 1950 and the big paid ones that have got contracts into the 2030s, then Hungary's really one of the top ones out of that bunch. It is, I'd say,
it's a weird little outlier, isn't it? It's
nice. It's the best European track outside of the original four, I think.
Yeah, I always rank it very highly. Hungaroring, I've always really liked it, to be honest. I think it's great, and I'm really happy it's delivering in Formula One. Ranked joint third. Now we've not got a second place, which means that this will give away the winner, obviously, but whatever. Joint third of Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, the opening two races of the 2022 season, both ranked on an average of 8 by us. We'll talk about Bahrain first, as it was the first race. And I mean, to be honest, when you think about Bahrain, there's a few things you go straight to, and that's Leclerc just completely outfoxing in DRS fight with Verstappen, and then both Rebels just conking out, and it just being a bit like, things are happening all over the place.
Yes, it was a great opener. It wasn't quite the opener of last year, but it was still extremely good. Just exciting. Had a bit more worry. Had me a bit more worried than maybe I deserve to be with stuff about DRS and playing in Saudi Arabia. Back that up, but actually it was okay in the end, and even the qualifying was fantastic. So yeah, it was just a good, solid season opener. And Australia's contracted to be the season opener a certain amount of times over the remainder of its contract. I think it might be 3 times, something like that. Anyway, but aside from human rights,
2035, isn't it? So I mean, that's a couple of times, but
yeah, I think it might have 5 then. I think it's about a third that it has to be. But yeah, if you leave aside the human rights issues, which you shouldn't, but in terms of just the track, then it is a very solid season opener alternative option for everyone to have, and it's delivered twice in a row.
Completely agree. Saudi Arabia, obviously we've been a bit kind of coy on ranking this on weekend and things like that. The weekend in Saudi Arabia was not good. The big crash in qualifying for Mick Schumacher was terrifying. And the fact that we just refer to that so flippantly, but yeah, it was really scary. Everything going on around the track, the missile strike 10 miles away, that it's so weird and so easy to forget about now, but it was absolutely huge. And everything around the track in Saudi Arabia was uncomfortable and not good. But the race was really exciting. You had a really long fight between Verstappen and Leclerc after that kind of developed, after Perez had been leading and looked like he had that race under control in the early stages. That race was just really kind of nip and tuck and exciting and different, and was a really good introduction to the 2022 regulations, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like if we're ranking these as a podium, Saudi Arabia should be demoted to third. I feel like there should be a clause in there that if you have a missile strike 10 miles away from the track, then you do get demoted a position in the event of a tie. But yeah, as you say, aside from all of that, which was enormously uncomfortable, even for us watching thousands of miles away, it was a really great race. It just showed off exactly what these guys can do. And there was a fantastic, I'd say the best battle of the year between Leclerc and Verstappen. Off the top of my head, was a nice little ding dong between them. And for a track that doesn't on paper look like it will be fantastic for racing, again, it showed that that's not the case. And when you've got cars like these and drivers like these, then F1 can be exciting even on dull looking tracks that look like sperm.
Yeah, exactly. And Formula One has a knack of kind of thinking, oh, this will be not great, and then it being great there, and then it's like, oh, this could really work, and then not really working. It has a knack of doing all that kind of weird stuff, and that's because of the random nature of Formula One that I think gets lost a bit in the way we kind of view racetracks and just sport in general. But yeah, it was good. But that means that our top ranked race was the British Grand Prix, Silverstone. We gave it a whopping lead in the average rankings, an 8.834. That's nearly a 9, because that's how numbers work. If you were rounding that up, it would be to a 9, or to that would be to a 10.
The only reason it isn't a 9 is because of Nigel.
What did Nigel do?
Gave it
Nigel did
8.
No, I did 8.5.
Oh, okay. Well, it's your fault then.
Yeah, it's my fault. But yeah, it was still my highest ranked. But yeah, you had as much as we said Hungary was probably the first three-way fight between teams. Silverstone was the one that sort of alluded to it and what the three-team fight could be. Before that, you had the Ferraris supposed to be getting a kind of slam dunk deal after Perez had a poor qualifying in the wet, if I remember rightly, and Verstappen then had damage early on, and then the Ferraris decided to just make it a race. And they were like, there's a Mercedes there. Let's bring him into the race. Made it exciting. There was a late safety car that made it exciting as well because they didn't pit Leclerc, which meant that the battling behind could be frenetic and tight, which it was. And we had that amazing move from Lewis Hamilton taking the opportunistic line and getting past Leclerc and Perez, and then being passed by Leclerc and Perez again.
And here comes Hamilton!
Yes, there we go. That's David Croft. But it was just had so many exciting points. Unfortunately, it did have a terrifying moment at the start of the race. And Joe Guanyu's huge crash behind the barriers was not fun to watch and not great at all. But the race that followed was really exciting.
Yes, aside from Joe, really, really liked it. Joe was the dark lining on the silver clad, really, in the way I describe Silverstone. There's the biggest gap between any races. The gap between second and first in our rankings is the biggest gap between any of them, apart from the jump from Imola to Monaco. So that shows you how highly or how far ahead of the other races that we put it. Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, that I said it at the time and you didn't agree with it, but the 6 laps after the safety car were fantastic. There was 9 overtakes between just the top 4 in that time, and it was fantastic. And aside from that, it was still a really good race. There was plenty of fascinating strategy in play. There was Will Hamilton win his first race of the season, and there was all of the kind of emotion and context and storyline around that. And then it didn't happen in the end, and we got something even more exciting, which was the mad dash to the end. You had Alonso mixing it with the podium at one stage, Hamilton getting a mad double overtake, and then, like you said, the one everyone forgets about, the 2 quarters, 3 quarters time where he got passed again. But yeah, it was, even Ferrari stuffing at the strategy can't ruin it, because oh man, it was so good. It was really, really,
to be honest,
a quality race.
I mean, that's one thing that slightly makes it weird, is that Ferrari messing up the strategy did kind of make that race. That's why I kind of feel like that kind of battle, it kind of, to me, is a little bit of it's amazing to watch. I think it's really because Leclerc's on tyres that just aren't working, which is backing it up a bit. Because after that, it did kind of string out. Sainz went away, Perez then went away, and Hamilton went away, and so on. And if they'd all been on the same tyres, I don't really know how it would have worked. I would have loved to have seen that. I think for me, that's the only thing that it begs, if that makes sense, which is kind of just a really annoying thing for me to think, but it is it's just how I think it comes with a stain of of roadblock. But you know what, that's fine, because that's just the way it was. And that is a race. It was a race for position. It wasn't a strategy let by kind of mess around. It was a race for position, and was really exciting, and that's why it's a top race. But that kind of brings us to the go.
No, I was kind of doing a wrapping up thing as well, but I think it's fascinating that the top 4 tracks we've got are all different. That we've got Hungary, which, as we said, is that 80s, 90s kind of nouveau European track, Bahrain, which is obviously brand spanking new, Saudi Arabia, which is a street circuit, and then Silverstone, which is a classic. And I think that shows the way that the cars are working, that you can have so many different tracks and all producing cracking racing.
Yeah, and I think that it is a testament to the cars. But to be honest, personally, I would say that Formula One was doing that anyway. You'd have kind of great races across the board at random places. But this is where we're going to throw it out there a bit, because we've got a couple of minutes left of this, and I'm going to ask you one question. I want one word answer for this, Adam, because otherwise we will run out of time. Of the 9 races remaining, which do you think will be the best?
Brazil.
Brazil? Okay. I'm going to say Singapore, just because I want it to be great.
I'm looking forward to Zandvoort as well.
Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting Zandvoort exists. Anyway.
And Suzuka.
We'll be back with Nigel, hopefully having connection in the future. Obviously, he made a little bit of a dip earlier on, but we stand with you, Nigel, and your internet problems. Come on, you can do it. We'll be back soon for a driver ratings episode where we do something similar with drivers.
And Hulkenberg.
And Nico Hulkenberg, because he is also technically a 2022 Formula One driver. Would he be in the Alpine seat? Whoa. No. And that's all, folks. Thank you very much for watching or listening, or however you chose to consume this podcast. You can follow the podcast on @WingItF1 on Twitter. You can follow us all individually on @FredCoast99 for me, @AdamDickinson01 for Adam, and @Nigel C. Journo for Nigel. You can keep up to date with our things and all of that. Go and give us a lovely review, because it's a nice thing to do, and then that means we get validation, and that's why we do it. We all do it just to be praised. And have a good time, and see you soon.
And here comes Hamilton.